and gentlemen, on behalf of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, I would like to welcome you all here in the hall and on the screens to our side event on the sidelines of the German-African Business Summit. My name is Gunter Moncayo. I am the Economic and Trade Policy Advisor in the Sub-Saharan Africa Department of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung in Berlin. I would like to convey the warmest greetings from the acting head of our office here in South Africa, Dr. Holger Dix, who cannot be with us today due to other official commitments. I'm very pleased that we are holding this event together with the German African Business Association. For me and my team in Berlin, the Afrika-Verein, as it is called in German, is one of our most important cooperation partners with whom we have enjoyed a trusting relationship for many years. For those of you who do not know yet us and our work, let me say a few words about the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung. The Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung is a political foundation active throughout Germany and abroad. We are politically affiliated with the Christian Democratic Union of Germany, the party of former Chancellor Angela Merkel, but we are independent in terms of finance and organization. The promotion of liberal democracy and a social market economy, of peace and freedom, transatlantic relations and European unification, this is what the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung stands for. We offer current analysis and practical guidance for the challenges of our time. We research historical and political backgrounds, and we share our insights with national and international decision makers from politics, businesses, and society. We believe that our efforts to promote democracy, rule of law, freedom, and the social market economy only have a lasting effect when they are thought of in international terms. This is why the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung has continuously focused on its European international partnerships since its early days and has opened an increasing number of foundation offices since the 1960s, leading to over 110 offices in over 80 countries. In Sub-Saharan Africa, CAS has 20 offices across the region. Here we focus mainly on the rule of law, media and political communication, security policy, political dialogue, as well as economic and trade cooperation. And since I not only have the honor to welcome you here as the representative of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, but also to be part of the discussion panel, I would like to hand over without further ado to Wiebke Polomka from Afrika-Verein. So it only remains for me to thank you for coming and for tuning in and to wish you a stimulating discussion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gunter, for the warm welcome. I have the pleasure today to welcome you on behalf of Afrika-Verein. My name is Wiebke Polomka. I'm the manager for Southern Africa. So super excited to be back in South Africa, actually the third time this year. For those of you who don't know Afrika-Verein, we're the German African Business Association. We have now been around for almost 90 years, representing German business in Africa. As Gunter already said, we have long-standing partnerships with foundations like the Konrad-Adenauer Foundations. I see some of our partners here also today. What we do is we support German businesses who are active in Africa. We help them with market entries. We help them finding the right partners. And so for that, we organize small events like this. We have a number of big forums in Germany, and we are also part of the organizing team here at the German African Business Summit, which I'm sure a lot of you will attend. So I'm happy to see you here, and I'm happy to meet you also at the GAPS. I think that is enough for introduction remarks. So I would now like to call our panelists for today onto the stage. You already met Gunter. We also have Dr. Christian Lindfeld from the Africa Advisors. We have Savannah Maziya, the executive chairperson from the Mmusi Group. We are still waiting for one of our panelists, Maimane. He will arrive shortly, but I think we can already bring everybody on stage and start discussing, and Mmusi will then jump right in. So please, our panelists, follow me. Gerne irgendwo hin. Savannah, come to my left. All right. Thank you to our panelists for being here today and to discuss with us African economies in transition. Thank you to the people online. You have the possibility to pose questions, and I will get them on my phone. So please don't be don't wonder why I'm looking on my phone. I'll get the questions here. So yeah, but I already prepared some for my panelists here to kick off the discussion. And yeah, today we're discussing African economies in transition. I mean, transition has been a hype word lately when we look at energy, you know, energy transition, there's a lot of talks about partnerships, but today we also want to take a different look at looking at a broader scale of, you know, what does economy in transition mean, and what are also the chances for cooperation. I would like to start with Savannah. As the second lady here on the panel. We had the pleasure of meeting in Berlin this year, where you told us about your inspiring company, a female-led company with a lot of female employers. So to start off, what role do women or women-led companies play in economic transition?
Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. So it's always a strange question to ask about what role do women play, because we do exist. We're not there. And if we are more than 50% of the population of the world, we hold up half the sky. So it's very important that we are involved from the beginning. And I always encourage people to not look at us as an afterthought, but really as part of the economy. You know, we give birth to people, we raise people. It's important that we're part of the economy. You know, our business has always, I'm female, been so all my life. So it was important for me to be able to see how I can help other females. As you know, based on our meeting in Germany, in Berlin, the biggest issue is I was always of the understanding that I wanted to go into mining because it represents a lot of the things that people use. Even today, as you and I sitting here, everything that we've got has some mineral from somewhere on the earth. And so that was important for me to be able to do. So it didn't matter to me whether I was female or male. I was a human being who was a user, and I wanted to be able to be part of that economic drive. So really for me, it's a normal human position, and it's a human rights issue. So I don't like to always only look at it as a female issue. I do, however, agree with you that the world needs to be able to really focus on women being much more participating in all these areas that are always thought of as male focused or male populated areas. But also I think women should go out and get what they want. I think the age of sort of sitting back and saying, well, it's going to come to me, that's gone. We've got to have to go out there and make our own mark in the world. Yeah.
Definitely. Maybe you can say 2 words what your company does.
Okay. Okay. So my business, Bunengi Group, operates all over Africa and South America. We have an office here in South Africa for Africa. We have a German office. We have a Hong Kong office for Asia. And we have an office in New York for the Americas. We are a company that began as a coal mining, copper mining, and gold mining company. We've since left coal. As you all know, no one likes coal, but we all like to keep warm. I'm not sure how we're going to deal with that, but a conversation for another panel. You know, and so we've gone into lithium, into rare earth, to graphite, copper. We also source minerals, a variety of players, whether it's manganese or iron ore, any of the other minerals are important for our cell phones, our computers, and battery manufactured cars. We are a member of the European Battery Association. We're also a member of the European Raw Metals Association. We're also in the energy space as well as the transport space. So we do a lot of work in building trains all over Africa and South America and Asia. We are also involved in the energy space, especially what we now call the new energy. And so we do a lot of them in biomass and in hydropower in that particular space. And then we are in the ICT space. We are a shareholder in a company called Cisco, which I think most of you know, which is a global ICT company. We've been involved with them for quite some time. So we're involved in a lot of things. We're in the drone making environment now. We're going to be going into semiconductors and chip making. So we're very involved in the 4th IR industrial revolution type progressive environment. And I implore all women to try and figure out a way to be involved. We don't want to get into this revolution and miss out in this revolution. So this one, I think, is meant for us to be able to really do well. So we do a lot of construction work. We own the largest construction company in Africa called WBHO. We're also in platinum and palladium with the Sibanye-Stillwater. Some of you know that particular company. So we're a pretty large firm doing a lot of things in Africa and throughout the world.
Yes, we can see that, and it was very impressive upon meeting you the first time. It's now impressive to hear it again.
Thank you.
So let's see, Christian, what impressive things are you doing at Africa Advisors? I mean, your company is focused on driving investments in Africa. I read on your website, you're also a member of Afrika-Verein. So how can investments shape economic transition, and in what way can investments also kickstart transitions?
Thanks for having me and for the invitation. I really enjoy being here back in Johannesburg. I actually lived here until 2016, which was quite nice, and always travel back and forth and see all the developments here in the country. Economic transition through investments. I mean, it's such a big word, investments. I mean, you can start from like seed money into an entrepreneurship business, up to investments into infrastructure projects. Nevertheless, investment in all categories are needed to drive that type of transition we need, but not just in Africa. I mean, we've seen it in waves in other parts of the world, so it's nothing particular for Africa to drive transitions. But let's start maybe with the big investments into infrastructure. So it's not just the investment into the infrastructure itself, it's also what enables that investment. And it's not just that there's a road now, or there's a railway, or there's a port. It also enables other businesses on that transition or on that investment to unlock other businesses. So it's not just the single investment you have to look at, it's always investments are in an environment happening. And that's very important for Africa. So we need to unlock the big investments so that also smaller investments can jump on board, like local businesses. If you build a street, you need a garage, you need a fuel station, you might need restaurants and hotels along that. So the single investment unlocks further transition and further investments, which is very important. So we need the big investments on the continent. If we look a bit at the early stage investments, and that's still a huge gap in Africa. So the seed investments, the early stage investments into entrepreneurs. And I don't want to call it startups because that's such a fancy word coming from the US, but in Africa we have entrepreneurs, many entrepreneurs, and they will drive the transition. And if they have at early stage investments, and it's not huge amounts you have to invest, it's investing in people, in an idea, trusting them, and they will make the difference. They will make the transition. And that's a huge gap. Venture capital, risk capital for the African continent should be the next wave, besides the big investments. And that will drive transition from the bottom in Africa.
Thank you so much. I actually have another question, a follow-up question with I wrote down startups here, but I call them entrepreneurs when I come back to you.
Yeah, okay.
Gunter, you already talked a little bit about what the Konrad Adenauer Foundation is doing and what you're working on here in Africa. So how do political foundations, in your case the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, view economies in transition? And do you also have programs, for example, working with institutions here?
Well, what we try to do, what we want to do is to open up spaces for discussion, right? And since we are a political foundation, we focus on the policy framework. That's our main target. And when we look at economies and economies in transition, we in Germany, we had also transitions in the past. We are living now, you mentioned some of the transitions that basically every economy in the world has to go through now. And we as Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, we are convinced that there is a specific model that helps you go through these transitions, and it's the social market economy. I already mentioned it in my welcoming words. And the social market economy is kind of a third way in between a socialist planned economy and laissez-faire capitalism. And it combines the efficiency of the market with the balancing of the welfare state. And by this, it makes it possible to combine sustainable economic growth with a high degree of social cohesion. And the special thing, and that's why it's so important, especially in times of transition, the special thing about the social market economy is that it's not a rigid concept. It's rather an idea based on principles that have to be adapted to a specific situation on site. And this is also why you will get very different answers if you ask different people what exactly the core of the social model economy is. And well, let me maybe give you an example based on the current political discussion in Germany that can also be applied to many other parts of the world. As you might know, in Germany we are living a time that we are calling energy crisis. So the energy prices are skyrocketing. A lot of private households fear that they will not be able to pay their electrical bills, their heating bills. So that's a huge challenge for the policymakers. What should be done? And once again, we come back to the core idea of the social market economy. It is important to have a sound policy framework and to not give into temptation to interfere too much into the pricing system, for example, in order to not lose this efficiency of the market. But at the same time, you have to take care of the people and do not leave them alone. And so every idea that came up in the political debate in Germany concerning energy prices always circled around the question, is it coherent to our general approach of social market economy? Is it possible to find a solution to help the people without giving up the market principle, the price principle? And yeah, that's why we, as Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, want to continue to open these spaces for debate and to see how we can adapt this set of ideas to the current economic situation on site.
Yeah, that is, I mean, energy crisis is a topic everywhere. It will also be a big topic at the GAPS. And it's so funny when you talk to South Africans and you tell them, oh, in Germany, we're going to be afraid that we won't have electricity for some point. And here they just look at you like, we are load shedding stage 6, stage 5. Right. So I actually told someone, well, maybe we also have load shedding in Germany. Can you imagine that? But yeah, when we talk about energy crisis, there's also the question of raw materials. It's a big discussion. And Savannah, you touched upon it that Bunengi is working in that space. So raw materials play a major role in economic transition. We talk about EV batteries now for electric mobility. How can a German-African cooperation look like in the raw material sector, and what approaches are needed to make it a successful partnership?
So I think the main word in this issue is partnership. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's important to understand is no one's an island, right? Whether we like it or not, even if we try and go away from globalization, as we try to protect our own spaces, the genie's out the bottle now. We've been able to work together. We need one another. And certain things that, is that me?
Yeah, I think it's the phone here.
It's the other phone.
It's somebody calling, offering you a partnership.
There you go. So sorry about that. But I'll talk as I look for this phone.
I think it's this one here.
No, it's another phone in my
and it gives me the chance to check if my sound is turned off. Okay.
Who gets a partnership call
I know,
here?
right? There you go. But anyway, sorry about that, folks. One of the things that we've come to realize is if we can work together and collaborate, we really are stronger. There's too many things that are happening in the world that show that we are interdependent. There are wars happening very far from here that affect us. We have nothing to do with those wars, but we have to deal with them. There's countries we didn't even know are, operating in a particular space, but all of a sudden you attack a country and the whole world says we have no wheat, right? Another country attacks another country and you realize we have no power. What's the plan going forward? I've spoken a lot about this with European, companies. And one of the things we need to talk about is how do we partner equally? One of the things that's really not working for us is we don't partner as equals. There's still that colonial look to say, we will do this for you. We will take this from you. And we will tell you how to do it. And it's not working anymore because other countries have now come and said, listen, I take you where I find you. All I want from you is this mineral and I will take it there, or can you work with me to go there? So perhaps one of the things that's really important, and especially when we have political parties as part of our partnership, is we all have as much to lose and to gain. We're no longer saying if this goes wrong for Germany, it doesn't matter in South Africa and vice versa. It goes wrong for all of us, right? If Ukraine goes wrong with this Russia thing, it goes wrong for all of us. So how do we get to a point where we are able to say, okay, one of the things my colleague spoke about there is the issue of entrepreneurship. We have it in bounds in this continent. What don't we have? We don't have money. We don't have the markets, right? So if you look at people who are becoming very successful in the world, like the Elon Musk and all those guys who are part of our client profile, they're now saying, okay, Savannah, I am going to be the biggest builder of battery metals, of battery cars in the world. I need to work with you to say, you are a miner. You know where to find the minerals, you know how to mine them, you know how to produce them, you know how to process them. I will be your off-taker, right? Welcome.
Yeah, welcome on stage, Mmusi Maimane.
Yes.
I truly apologize. I was at the business event just then.
Thank you, Elsa.
I truly
Thank you.
apologize. Yeah.
We are now currently discussing how we can partner in the raw material sector. And so Savannah was just talking that, partnerships are very, very important and we need equal partnerships.
So what's critical then is to say, okay, you will mine this for me and produce this for me and process this for me, and I will be your off-taker. That's what's our two problems for me. It means a mine that I own that I didn't have the capacity to mine potentially, or didn't have the plan to mine, I can now bring to production earlier. It means that I now have an off-taker that I can be able to sign a contract with for 30 years, 50 years. It means that now I can plan to hire 12,000 people. It means that now I can be able to be a big tax contributor. It means that now I can be able to be in a position to say, okay, I want to have X amount of women that are trained. I now can forward plan. But it has to be that we have a relationship that we are equal partners. It has to be that we have a relationship where the rules are also clear, because I think one of the things, one of my mining guys is here, and he'll tell you that we struggle with sometimes in the continent is the rules are not clear. If you are going to work with a big company like Glencore, they're 1,000 years ahead of me, right? I'm just starting the race. Look, I've been in business for 30 years, but they've been there for over 100 and generational. So they've got the banking relationships. They've got the off-takers. They've got all the policies that, you want people to pay for. I mean, in my business with 12,000 people, I have 20 of them that just look at compliance. And they've only come in the past 5 years. Because if I'm dealing with a German company, they want me to have 1,000 compliance issues. They want me to have 1,000 this. Now, if you want to be able to help an entrepreneur, they don't have an HR department, talk less of a compliance department. And so they have the mineral that you want, and they can process it. How do you partner with them so that they can be able to meet what you require? And also to be able to understand that, one of the things that we're talking about today is the issue of climate change. Okay, how do we, you can't say to me, Savannah, give me the lithium, but you can't touch anything. You can't do it with coal. I have a smelter. It has to run for 24 hours. It can't come with a solar panel. It just doesn't, right? Maybe later it will. Once we figure out how to store the batteries, once we figure out, but right now, to meet that you want, I've got to be able to use code. So it's that reasonability and partnership and really understanding that maybe my world right now is very different from yours, which yours is 1,000 years ahead of me. So how do we work together to be able to make this work? I don't believe that we can't. We've got clients in Germany that really we take and say, listen, we've got the policies. We can even help you to train those who are the smaller players. We can be able to make them to upgrade from being artisanal miners to being regular miners. We can give them machinery, but you've got to then say to me, I'll buy what they make.
Yeah.
There's no point in me training them and then they're able to produce something and then you don't buy it and you say, well, it's not enough here and I don't like this and the guys do this and whatever. We've got to be a bit more reasonable. So we need partnerships, but at the same level. Yeah.
Definitely.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because the partnership question is so important between Africa and Germany. And you asked at the beginning about investments. We also need to invest in the partnership. It's not like, okay, we need green hydrogen. Let's go to some of the African countries and then there is green hydrogen. When I travel Africa, a lot of people say they would love to do business with Germany, but the Germans are not here. And they don't invest into that partnership. And it's not like you meet once. It's not you meet twice. You need to invest into a partnership. It's people business.
Yeah.
And if you don't trust each other, then you can't come when you have a need and say, I need this, and can you help me? You need to invest into that partnership, and that's where we need to learn how to really invest on a same eye level partnership with Africa, and then it will automatically come over time. And then you trust each other, and then things develop because we see the needs here, and it's synergetic because a lot of the needs in Africa we solved in Europe, but a lot of needs in Europe are solved or from a resource perspective. And I'm not talking about natural resources.
Yeah.
I'm talking also human resources. They are here. So there is so much synergy in working together, but we need to invest in that relationship and not on a need basis, on a people basis, and then we solve that over time.
Yeah, definitely. And when we talk about partnership, I would like to bring in Mmusi. Are you ready to join the discussion? I mean, you're from the political sphere. You have experience in the political sector. When we talk about partnerships, a partnership that is also important is politics and economy. How can we work together and how can we work side by side to achieve economic transition? Because Gunter already talked about you need to create a political framework also for transition. So from your perspective, from your experience, how can politics and economy work together, or what needs to be improved?
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much for having me, and good evening, everybody. I feel like I should rather say that. But firstly, I think South Africa and Germany have got a profound history of political, economic collaboration. That's been historically the case, and the work that the German foundations do in South Africa is important for political development. In fact, there's been a significant role in how we were able to articulate our own constitution in South Africa that helped frame it around some of the principles that the German government, and certainly principles around how do you set up the state, became absolutely vital. And principles that we've taken for granted now that are fairly well established, term limits, things like transparency. I've been to the Bundestag, and one of the things that are great about it is that you recognize the principles that are in place and the collaboration politically that sits at that point. What I think is going to be crucial is that there are 2 points I'd like to make up front. The first is not to separate the role of Germany as part of the EU and the EU partnership as it does in South Africa. We recognize the fact that the EU has been one of the more leading investment partners in the country. In a geopolitical relationship, I think it's important that I go to the next point, which is about the fact that South Africa needs to be able to articulate its own economic objectives. Because that's where the real rubber hits the road politically, is being able to articulate that when we talk about transition from coal, which was one of the conversations we're having, but some of the services sector, how do we ensure that bilateralism enhances trade routes, visa allocations, things like the significant investment in the automobile industry, certainly in communities like Gqeberha, etc. In all fairness, when the politics fail of being able not only to articulate South Africa 2030, but fail at basic investments around infrastructure, around ensuring visa processing, ensuring that more than anything, the safety around German nationals who arrive in the country to be able to trade, those become very difficult things. So I do think that it could never be so. I think we're entering into a global space upon which political leadership and economic leadership is going to be vital, that politicians understand how the economy works, and solutions that are put on the table not only need to be politically sellable, but economically viable, because we are beyond a space now where you can argue from an ideological point of view and simply say, well, we'll nationalize or socialize or market liberalize or whatever. Those days, I certainly live in a post-ideological universe that wants to say, let's actually tangibly, as equal partners in trade relations with our objectives expressed such as this, understand that we'll hold up our end of the bargain if you do your end. And certainly my engagements with the German government and with the former chancellor and the German president when they were out here, I found that there was a willingness to have that conversation, but it's going to be important. The last thing I will say, I know I've said quite a few things, is that as it speaks to the broad continent of Africa and South Africa, I do think there are certain conditions upon which Africa needs to be able to take the lead. And for example, a conversation around immigration is an important one as it relates to the economy. And one of the things that I think it'd be important for knowledge sharing is for the German government to be able to recognize that South Africa has had to deal with an influx, a net influx, particularly into cities, of high immigration. If you think about Chancellor Merkel and that immigration conversation, I do think there's a need for that conversation to be held. But also, not only from a resource management point of view, but from issues around collaboration on security, etc. These become economic issues. Digital integration becomes an economic issue, infrastructure build. And so it's going to be crucial that we articulate our objectives, we partner on that regard on equal footing and chart our way forward that's mutually beneficial.
Thank you so much. And I mean, that's why we have even smaller events like this. That's why we have the German African Business Summit coming up now, where we also have Vice Chancellor Habeck coming. So I think it's a good stage for dialogue. And I'm really looking forward to the discussions. You mentioned, let me ask a quick follow-up question. Germany, and we should also view it from perspective of EU, like Germany is part of the EU. How's the stage of South Africa and the AU? Are you also now working more and more on an AU level, or is it still country by country a little bit, or maybe also the regions like the SADC region more powerful than the AU?
I think no one can deny that the Africa Free Trade Agreement is significant in what it seeks to achieve intracontinentally. So I think as a partnership and a relationship, that's going to be important. But if I just take one step back and raise just where the African Union agenda is going to be vital for the bilateralism that we're discussing, I think no one can deny the fact that post-COVID, the conversation around pharmacology as it speaks to Africa is going to be important. How we produce vaccines and vaccine patents here as vital. And here, if you allow me to be critical of the EU, I did think that there was a profound mismanagement and a patronizing of Africans as it speaks to that particular issue. Because I was in Spain when Omicron hit, I came back to South Africa, and when I arrived here, I heard that the borders had been shut to South Africa because we had all of these cases of Omicron kicking off. And I thought to myself, we've got less cases relative to what the US is and all of that. Yet there was this view that said, shut those Africans out because they are a problem. Now that doesn't help as it speaks to conversations around pharmacology in a significant pandemic as we just saw. I think you would have spent significant time discussing energy and climate change in that relationship. But equally so, at the end of the day, even when I interrogate the conversation around the just energy transition, the missing gaps is how do we do green financing in a way that makes sense, right? Because it doesn't matter what bilateral relationships comes in. One of my involvements has been to not only to run a social impact fund, and you recognize that the cost of capital is quite significant. Some of these issues have been raised by even Prime Minister Motley in his Nelson Mandela lecture, become absolutely important as those two relations go. And the last is, what are we doing around the bioscience community collectively in a world? Because there's no denying that the East-West conversation is occurring. Let me take the Ukraine-Russia debate at the moment. It is ongoing right now, and yet there wasn't a thorough consultation why African countries have taken in some ways positions at the African Union, at the UN Security Council that have embarrassed a citizen like myself, right? Because we're sitting and South Africa is ambiguous on the position and the African Union isn't giving guidance. And it feels like now you are entering into these geopolitical wars. I would urge, as part of the collaboration, and we talk about global security, we need to be able to come back and say, actually, why is it that when it comes to vaccines, etc., you are happy to back Russia, whilst the EU should have been taking a lead to say, when we take vaccine rollout and vaccine mandates, here's the route that we are going to go for the purposes of the continent. So when we understand geopolitics and global geopolitics on those three issues, security, health, pharmacology, we need to have global interests that are aligned so that when we have a conversation with the EU, it makes much better sense. So the last example I would use, which is fairly common cause, I was in Greece recently, and one of the broader conversations there was, look, in engaging Prime Minister, the Greek Prime Minister, he raised the fact that on the energy space, they were able to transition to Greece 2.0, and they had a day, they cited this famous day, where the entire energy grid was dictated by renewables. South Africa's coal reliance is at 67% of its energy grid. That day isn't coming soon. Suffice to say that their cost of input to achieve renewables was significantly lower than what it would mean for South Africa. And now we have a currency that's taking a battering because of issues around mattresses, etc. But I'm not getting into that for now. I'm merely indicating that when we come down to some principal agreements, when we talk about equality of partnership, let us also recognize shared objectives, and let's also recognize and shared practice, so that Greece's cost of capital is not far more significant than the cost of capital in South Africa.
Yeah.
That's going to be crucial. Otherwise, any partnership that occurs will simply be on an equal footing, because if you are borrowing capital at 7% and I'm borrowing at 0%, believe you me, my advantage is already established from day one.
Definitely. Thank you so much. You mentioned the AFCFTA. I had a question for Gunter for the AFCA, because I saw that you wrote a paper about it, about the implementation of the AFCFTA in this year. So what role can the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, play in economic development, and can it boost economic transition? We talked about partnership and common objectives. I mean, with the AFCFTA, I think everybody shares this common objective to create one big market. So what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I was very happy to hear Mmusi mention the AFCFTA, because we observe this process with very high interest. I know that it's a huge challenge. More than 50 countries trying. When we look, some years ago, the European Union tried to negotiate a trade agreement with the United States, the TTIP. And you would say, okay, they are economies, they are, I don't know, they have a similar structure, they share a lot of values, they are democracies. What can be so difficult? But it was very difficult. And imagine now this scaled up to more than 50 countries on the African continent, with economies that are so different as South Africa and Burundi, or you can find other examples where you see that the interests and the needs are so diverse. So I know it's a huge difference, and maybe because you asked Mmusi also about the AU and SADC, both is important, because I'm convinced that in order to make these negotiations work, you need the regional economic communities. Because if you make the regional economic communities work, then you can push the negotiations on the continent level, and you can you can make use of the economic benefits at a much earlier stage. Now come back to your question, because I really do think that if Africa manages to accomplish this challenge, and I really do hope so, then it can be a game changer for the continent. And not only for the continent, also for us in Europe, because Savannah, you mentioned, if it goes wrong, it goes wrong to all of us, but also if it goes good, we also benefit from it. A lot of economies on the African continent share two major difficulties: low diversification of the export structure and low added value. And if you compare the trade that leaves the continent to the trade that happens on the continent, you will see that the intra-regional trade, it's much more diversified and has a much higher added value. So if you make this African market work, then you can tackle these two problems. You would have more added value in the African economies, because nowadays a lot of countries export unprocessed raw materials or agricultural products, and you would have more diversified structure that would make the continent more resilient in terms of external shocks. And we heard from Mmusi shared objectives. We heard from you, Savannah, how do we partner equally? And the AFCFTA would also give the African countries a huge amount of leverage to negotiate, for example, with the European Union. And it is true that right now it is a major challenge of the European Africa policy to honestly name common interests. Because unfortunately, it's still too often the case that we Europeans, we either pursue one-sided interests, it was also mentioned here in the round, or that we pretend that our commitment is primarily for altruistic reasons for the benefit of Africa, when in fact it's for our own interests, right? And the leverage to make new partnerships work, for example, in the raw material, in the strategic raw material sector, because there's from a European point of view, there is much to say for strengthening the capacities for processing raw materials on the African continent, because it would allow more added value here, and it would allow us to diversify our supply chains, and it would benefit both sides of us. But for this, we need to be able to negotiate on eye-to-eye level. And that's why I think that the AFCFTA is of such high importance.
Yeah. Maybe Christian, from your point and from your experience, the role of the AFCFTA.
It is important. It is, first of all, for me also a signal into the African continent. Let's work together. Let's achieve things together. And it enables also in the partnership perspective to not think in countries. It's like when we sometimes do help a German small, medium-sized enterprise to look towards the African continent. The first question is, where should we go? Which country? So, and then they come up with like, should we go to South Africa? Should we go to Kenya? Because the obvious ones, because they know it. But this enables us a completely other discussion. We can discuss regions. So where are the big regions? You talked about urbanization. So we don't need to look into a country perspective. We can go in a regional perspective. We have cities. They are as big and they will grow. Like Lagos will be nearly 100 million people by end of the century. I mean, if you're a market entry just for Nigeria, for Lagos, I mean, it's a huge market. So we can focus on a regional approach. And also kind of competition is coming up through that. So if you say, okay, maybe Nigeria is the bigger market, but in Ghana, I have better conditions for a market entry or for like manufacturing facilities. So you can also choose. And I mean, competition always is also a good thing to come up with the best solution. So we are also fully convinced that this is happening. And again, with all the critics, if you think how long it took us in Europe to really agree on all these things. So we should rather be quiet in challenging and criticizing the African Union, because they already are fast and quick. And Gunter, you would have, I mean, more statistics around it, but it's not like it's taken over decades. They just started. Let's see where they are in 10 years. And then we can compare who's quicker in implementing and realizing it. That will be interesting to see that.
I think if I can just add one additional point is that whilst the agreement is in place and the policy framework is in place, there is something important to learn from China as a bad example in certain instances, because what makes trade between South Africa and Botswana or Zambia or Zimbabwe easier or better is what actually happens at Bait Bridge. Right? It's whether we can move goods quicker and easier intra-Africa or not. That's the long and the short of it. And one of the things that become profoundly hard is that it sometimes, if I'm exporting a set of jeans, easier for me to get them to Beijing than it is for me to get them to Dakar. That tells you that geographically that is a challenge for what Africa needs to do. So the lesson is, yeah, fair enough, in a continent of 1.2 billion people, median age that's less, infrastructure build is going to be something that when we look at respective governments are going to be vital. Because if we do not get that right, it becomes secondary to whatever material you produce and how quickly you can move those goods. Because our port security, our moving of goods and intra-trade in Africa is slowed down by poor infrastructure.
I have to agree with you, Mmusi, on that. You know, when I hear about the trade agreement, as a business person, I'm very excited. We operate in 16 countries in the continent. Okay, that sounds wonderful when you say that. On paper, it sounds great. So you've got this policy in place that's supposed to stimulate trade amongst all of us. But then there's the practicality of things. How are things really working? And sometimes I think the relationship between ourselves as business people and politicians is what they say, women are from Venus or Mars or whatever. It's so distinct sometimes. I'll give you a very good example. When we go and bid for mines, wherever we go in the continent, you will sit across the table with your team, with the Ministry of Mines, on your own. The French will come in with the French minister. The Germans will come in with the German minister. You're on your own. And then they might even come in with the bank if the minister's there, right? And you're all bidding for the same mine. And what does that say to the guy across the table? It says the people in government understand the relationship between business and the private sector. It goes back to what you were saying, Mmusi, about understanding what you want. I go to Mmusi, he's Minister of Mines. I say, Mmusi, I'm going to apply for this. Could you come with me? Corruption. So I am on my own as this person, right? And what will the minister do? He will then say to the other minister, if you give it to the French, we will then help you with that village and put lights over there. I'm just coming as Savannah and my wonderful team, number one. Number two, if I'm lucky enough to get that particular opportunity, the cost of making it work and the cost of funding it is so astronomical. And then I come to you as the European partners and say, I will sell you this lithium for X. And you say, I can get it for China for Y. So what are we doing here? If you want to be development partners, be that. But let's not play the game that you want to do this, but only on a Thursday between 1 and 2 in the morning, potentially, maybe, I'm not quite sure.
If there's no load shedding.
If there's no load shedding, indeed. If you look at Germany and where the strength of Germany lies, it's not the huge companies. It's the small to medium style businesses. I think they've got a name for it, I forget what they call it.
Mittelstand.
There you go. And yet you want to only deal with the big businesses here. And yet you only want to be able to have those medium, small businesses do things that only the big businesses can do. There has to be an understanding that if Europe wants to remove themselves from being viewed as former colonizers, who want to now colonize us economically, who want to come into the continent and say, you give me this, this, and this. When do we develop? When do we become the ones who can say, I will build from the beginning to the end a drone, and maybe I'll get one particular thing from Germany? We are still working in a way, even now as we sit here, that says, Savannah, give me lithium of this spec, of this, and this, and this, and don't touch it. Send it to me as concentrate. I'll go to cathode, I'll go to this, I'll go to that. But we're partners, and give it to me less than what I would get from somewhere else. And I'm so thankful that I got the order, that I will do it. Fairness is important. Transparency is important. And I understand that you all want to be able to get the great price that you can to be able to remain competitive. But if Europe wants to change the way that we do business, be fair. Don't look at us as the former this, that you can talk to us this way. Deal with us as people who will be important to you. Because in the next 100 years, if we close shop and say we're going to go to the East, what becomes of you? Because that East is not interested in you. So if you can cultivate this relationship now, and if you can invest in this relationship now, and if you can come at it transparently and our politics can mix and really be able to say, we have a relationship, we know each other to a large degree, but let's change the mindset. Because the mindset will move mountains. The minute I feel you're in my corner, I will move mountains. But when I feel that you're still coming at me as a former that, and I've got to do things that you wouldn't ask the Americans to do if they had the same mineral, or the Australians or such, who are my competitors in the mining space, I am very, very eager to look at the Chinese people. Because they come in and they say, this is the price. How can we help you invest in this thing, Savannah? How can we make it work? Because whether they're stockpiling, I got to feed my family, right? So whatever the situation is about this being green, they don't care about my coal problems, about my steam machine going this way. And I sell and my family gets to eat. And 12,000 people get to come in to work every single day. This is the thing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
100%.
Definitely. So we touched upon quite a few topics today. Before I go into my closing round of questions, I would like to invite the people here in the room and the people online. If you have questions, please raise your hand, post your question in the chat. Yeah, we have a question there. Do we have a microphone, or you just talk very loudly? But I think for the people online, we'll give you a microphone.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to also ask a question. My name is Andrew. I'm from Burundi. I've heard what the panelists say, and it's interesting that in what you're saying, we understand that as Africa, whether we like it or not, in terms of development, Europe is ahead of us. Now, I want to take this to when we even start talking about progressive laws, which Europe is able to implement while Africa is following. And I'm taking this to the issue of Glencore. The interesting thing is you're saying that you are governance and rule of law. And sometimes some of the things we have to deal with in Africa come from Europe. We know the issue with Glencore. And then it was interesting that South Africa, but it's still a multinational which Africa cannot deal with, but European courts and the American courts managed to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions from the room? I think we are also back online. I get the sign. Wonderful. Welcome back online. We just experienced load shedding in South Africa, so we're all good. We had that experience and we're moving on. So I think there was no more questions here in the room. So maybe I'd like to start with my wrap-up questions.
I think this question about Glencore is crucial. Given the without trying to get into the minutiae of the case, I do think, and I wanted to make this point, it's always dangerous when you on an international platform self-reflect on some of the dilemmas that we face about the state of governance in many African states as it pertains to corrupt leadership that sits there. Let's sometimes be fair. So you find that sometimes you deliver leadership that has long lost the interest of development, as it were, but has a primary interest of self-enrichment, which means the enforceability of global laws that govern corruption becomes hard because you've got a willing ally in particular countries, which is a challenge, right? So, and I want to support the point that you make by making this particular point, that it is now, I'm not expecting that in all 54 African states, the caliber of leadership is going to be the same. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I do think there are certain countries, South Africa being one, that need to take a strong leadership role in the continent that produces the sort of global leadership that we can give. Because I think sometimes when the conversations around grey listing, around credit rating, around all of these issues take place, public leadership from African leaders is not there to make the strong argument that we need to make, which is to say, here's the state of play here. Here's what the world looks like, and here are the facts on the table, so that we can enforce laws that govern across multiple spaces. And I sometimes find when trade agreements are being made, you arrive in particular spots and even the Minister of Finance is not there to be able to have that conversation. And that impairs what the nature of the agreement comes in. I think about ASEAN, let me take that as an example, vis-a-vis SADC. When there's engagement, even with China, ASEAN arrived there with a unified position, they've researched it, they know where they're going, and they position their interests. I don't always think we do that. And then lastly, when you create leadership that is forward-looking, this is not going to be a unique problem to Glencore. Even in some legalized fashions, for example, tax havens. Today, Apple is tax haven in Ireland. Mm-hmm. Their taxes are being derived there, but they're trading fully here. Mm-hmm. We have attracted Amazon to come to South Africa, but the taxes from Amazon are not going to be consumed here. Mm-hmm. And what does it mean for the domestic economy of South Africa? So I think we need leadership that is able to, one of my great privileges is being able to step away a little bit from politics for the last number of years to begin to genuinely get into the nitty-gritty of some of the pain you go through as business people. Because I don't always think politicians understand it, and I certainly don't think they write policy that responds to the real day-to-day challenges of what goes on in a business. So I think when we interrogate illicit trade, when we look at penalties, when we look at tax havens, there's a collective conversation that must be had. And even this morning, I had a meeting even with the SARB, the South African Reserve Bank, And that conversation was inherently about the fact that when we look at global transactions, about 97% of them, I'd say, are legal and genuine. But then you get these 3% transactions, sign off, all of that. But the investigating ability that sits across various parts of the world is poor, which means those 3% transactions are not being able to be investigated properly.
Yeah.
So I think we really need, particularly for central bankers, various institutions of government, to be capacitated that we deal with international trade a bit better.
I have to, as you're talking, one of the things that strikes me is it would be wonderful if our political counterparts had a little business experience, even selling just one cigarette. Just to know how to buy it and sell it and see what's required in that realm. Because a lot of the policies that we do, especially in our continent, does not promote the growth of business. There's nothing as difficult as being an African doing business in Africa. If you're a German company, welcome. If you're an African person, who's your mama? What you doing here? Are you grown enough to be doing this? And what we need from the politicians, be they in Germany, be they in South Africa, is the full understanding of what is required to do business. Because we actually do need protection. Whilst people talk about protection is a terrible thing, you can't have a baby who's born today and you put her on the street. They don't have the immune system. They don't have the wherewithal to know where to go. You are 1,000 years ahead of us. And you are requiring in many areas for us to be similar, like the area of processing. I started off as a coal mining person, and I was very proud to be a coal mining person. And then someone said to me in my investment pool, Savannah, you're going to have to pull back on that thing because, our shareholders and wherever say they don't want to be in coal mining. Mm-hmm. So now my growth as a business, as a country, is now stymied, and my counterparts elsewhere can afford to be in the new power. I just can't, right? And then when you're in trouble, then you go back to the old power. And now I'm like, what's going on? You just told me to cut off R1 billion investment because this thing's not going to work. We need to get to a point where, as you were saying, Mr. Maimane, politicians need to understand that business has to be protected like a newborn child, jealously protected. Mm-hmm. It is the thing that pays taxes to make the country work. It is the thing that keeps people employed. It is the thing that enables us to be able to stand up and be able to take care of our lot, those who can work and those who can't work who are in the social system. And until we do that and we don't see business as the enemy, as the whatever, that's important. Mm-hmm. But then also, let's have the same laws. I'll give you a very interesting example. If my business had done what Glencore, ABB, Siemens, and others had done, Mr. Maimane would have gone straight to court, opened up a case, and closed me down. Mm-hmm. Right?
Maybe not me. I'm on your side.
And rightfully so. But guess what? You make someone pay 0.1% of their turnover. They pay it and they're back in tomorrow. Yes. Mm-hmm. I won't survive it. My name will be everywhere. I walk into any company, I am a pariah. But the folks at Siemens will keep going. The folks at ABB will keep going. And they were the ones paying all the things at Eskom. The very same Eskom that's not able to pay lights now. Mm-hmm. For one of the companies I won't mention who are on the NASDAQ, Eskom was 78% of their revenue. An international company was getting that money from us, mm-hmm. keeping them going in an international stock exchange. But it's okay. Tomorrow they pay $10 and they continue. But if I do it, even for 10 Rand, you see this one, you can't be trusted, these blacks. You can't deal with money, these blacks. It has to be horses for courses, and it has to be equal. So the German relationship is important here. It's important in the European relationship. It's important in the fairness environment, but it's more important in the partnership to develop. Because if we're all developing together, we all benefit. If we're all able to ensure that trade comes in and out, because this agreement within the 54 countries has a lot of tests to go through. We're going to start seeing in the next 10 years, for example, pullback. Why is South Africa getting more than us? Why is this one? It's the normal way relationships go. We should allow that to happen. And not say because this country fell and that one didn't do it properly, it's collapsing. You have a hard time in Europe, 27 countries. Tomorrow Greece is doing something and now there's a problem. Tomorrow this one is doing something, maybe we should pull them out. You know, you had the G8, now you've got the G7. I mean, these things happen.
Yeah.
But there was no
We
falling
had
apart.
Great Britain in
We
the
had Great
EU,
Britain,
and
but
now
now
not
so
anymore.
good, right? These things happen. Be fair in how you allocate blame. You know, if I murder someone, it's the same murder as murdering the other person. If we've both done it, I shouldn't get the life sentence and you get 10 because of the color of your skin. It shouldn't work this way, or because you're a Westerner or whatever. Until we do that, we still go as Africa as a provider of something that Europe needs, but cannot partner with. So we used to provide labor, but you could not be partners. Now we provide raw materials, but we can't be partners. So we cannot come at it fairly again. Again, we're in this thing where we must always be at the bottom for you to be high. It almost feels like that we can never be equal for you to remain where you are. The problem we live in now is, in this world we're in, my niece is here, this world of Instagram and all these other things. People now know things they didn't know 40 years ago when I was growing up. So now it doesn't have to be in a newspaper. It doesn't have to, we now know things through this Twitter thing that you people have that we wouldn't know before. So we can't keep playing this game. The world is changing, but our policies are not changing. And we're shocked when the results are that there's war. We're shocked when people are hungry that don't need to be hungry. We're shocked when we're finding that people are not getting the education or the spaces or the opportunities that they're not. And then nature hates a vacuum. That's when all the evil then comes in, all the games come in, because we're not acting fairly. We have a chance as Germany and South Africa and as Europe incorporated to lead the African discussion, to lead how the relationship should be. The problem, Mr. Maimane, that we have is, I don't know if we know how to. I don't know if we have the script. And when you don't have the script for your life, someone else will write it and you will not enjoy it. So we need to know so when I come to sit with the across table, I say, I want these 10 things. These 3 may be negotiable, but these 7 are not. You're in? Yes. But I don't think we have that yet. And then it sort of affects us as business. And then we in the end, we start having survivable business transactions. And those things are very dangerous because you're always open to a friend saying, listen, I got a slush fund here. If you can make it happen for me, I can make it happen for you.
Yeah.
And so that's it.
So we have to write a script. Christian,
Exactly.
what is your script? I mean, Mmusi, Savannah, you already had very strong closing statements. Christian, what is your script?
Yeah,
What
well,
can we learn?
I mean, first of all, a comment about who is ahead. If we hear Germany or Europe is ahead of Africa, yes, maybe in some areas. It depends on the narrative we are talking. Do we build better cars? Yes, most likely. But there are so many other areas where we can learn from each other. When we went back from South Africa to Germany, for us, on a personal note, it was harder to go back to Germany, a very individualized country.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Instead of here, I had brothers and sisters I have known of. Yeah. So the community and everything, everybody was taking care of us, my kids and everything. So going back to Germany was really hard for us. I would have loved to stay. And that's why I'm still coming to the African countries and traveling back and forth. So we should stop comparing individual things. We should try and really bring the things together where everybody has strengths. Everybody has certain strengths.
Yep.
But if I only compete my strengths with others, most likely I will find where others have weaknesses. But if I'm open to discover the strengths of the others, then it's coming together as a partnership. And we can learn a lot from the community thinking, but also the way Africans invent. In Germany, we go like iterative step by step. Here we leapfrog. We leave out innovation steps because we want to have straight the best solution. So we can learn from each other. And if we bring that together, then we are on eye level. And we really make a transition which is not only relevant for Africa, we also need a transition in Europe, in particular also in Germany, to get rid of the old views of economy or old views of the society. And that's where we can learn a lot from Africa. And it's our neighbor. We don't need to go to China, to the US or somewhere. It's our neighbor. And we should become neighbors, very, very close neighbors.
Yeah, for sure. With a growing relationship. Gunter, what is your script? What have you learned? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. Well, I can sign a lot of the things that you three said, and especially the last aspects that Christian mentioned, because for me it's always very, it gives me so much when I travel to the African continent and to South Africa, and special to be held up to the mirror, to hear the things that we are not doing well. Because this is an impulse that we need to rethink our approach, our concept of partnership, for example. And I'm lucky to hear that we have strong partners here that can help us also to influence also the political debate in Germany and in Europe, because we need the strong voices. And that's what I always take back home, these strong voices that hold up to the mirror, but at the same time, you mentioned brothers and sisters, never give you the idea that you're not welcome. And this is great. And what I also always admire is the resilience of the people here. We experienced the lights going out. You see the traffic lights out on the streets, but the people always find a solution to the problems. They always find a way around, and it works. I can tell you, if in Berlin the traffic lights go out on the major crossroad,
Go crazy.
it's chaos.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows,
Yeah.
nobody would know what to do.
Yeah.
They say, okay, it's not in my script, and then that's it. And then they wait for some orders or for a policeman to arrive. Here you take the fate to your own hands, and you find a solution. And it's something that we can learn a lot from.
Definitely. Thank you so much for those closing words. I think we had
I
some.
think she's got a question, I think.
There's an online question. Okay, let's have that last question. Let me see. Well, the Wi-Fi is not working, so I don't know. I can get that question. Or can you grab a microphone and read the question, maybe? Christoph has it here.
I think while they set that up, another key point to make, one of the things that strengthened bilateralism is the development of pipeline of learning. And I think one of the things that would be helpful to give meaning to the partnership would be, in fact, to create exchange programs for students who some can learn in South Africa and some can learn in Germany. It sounds simplistic, but I tell you where it matters is the fact that you have just gone back to Germany saying, those guys are not roaming the streets with lions. It's a developed economy there. So when you talk investment, please let's be clear.
Yeah.
What because I think sometimes there are myths that people hold on to. The other day I was in London and I arrived there. I thought, what sort of banana republic are you running here? Circulating prime minister.
Yeah.
Because they're accustomed to not doing that. Now, I must be honest, gleefully, and it's sad, and I'm just saying this, but I'm actually enjoying the Netflix series on, there's not a pun for it, but on FIFA and the corruption. Why I enjoy it is not because I enjoy watching corruption, but I think it's nice sometimes for people to realize that corruption knows no race.
Yes.
It's actually quite welcoming. I always think to myself, if you don't look at Africa and immediately in your head go, dark continent, corrupt people. No, watch FIFA. so it's quite welcoming to have that. So
Absolutely.
I think it's good to have that knowledge share and experience, because then people, when they talk authentically, can say, I've been to Germany, so that when I come back, I don't come back stereotypically saying oh, those guys are still supportive of the past, or whatever the thing is. I know it's not the case.
Yeah.
So I demystified. Let learners experience that. Those will be important for long-term bilateral trade.
Indeed.
Mmusi, I'm just, you don't know, but I'm half Mexican. So if you want to learn about corruption, I invite you to Latin America. And I can show you
That's right, how you do it right.
how to do it right.
That's right, yes, indeed.
Yes.
Okay, I think we have the question online. Lynn, I see you have a question, but can we give that in the open networking later? Okay, the question online.
Yes, the question is from Ferdinand, asking, African countries face a challenge of not having quality infrastructure comparing to other continents, especially to the developed countries. What would be your advice to the policymakers or government to solve such infrastructure deficits without falling into public debt trap? Because without infrastructure, trade in Africa will always be difficult.
Yeah.
We need another
when
hour.
I was younger, I used to think, when I used to travel, I've been doing the continent thing for over 25 years now. And when I started this whole thing, I used to think, this is crazy. 100% of the people in the continent that are leading are either educated overseas, have been overseas, have seen good roads and everything. But I then also say, what does it take to build good infrastructure? It takes jobs, because then there's a tech space. And a lot of the countries don't have a large tech space. That becomes an issue. And from that tech space, you can then build the roads, you can then build the infrastructure, you can then build all these other things. And where I think I always have the disconnect is that I do know that there's money for these things. But is it enough to be able to deal with the population as we have it? Sometimes we get compared with the Indias and we get compared with the, the Chinas. But we may be 1.1 billion strong, but we're not one country. And so South Africa comes and has a strong tech space and strong business and a smaller population in comparison to some countries. And was able to do the infrastructure. Look, we're lagging behind in quite a few areas. But we have done a lot since 1994. Sometimes we don't look back and say, what's been achieved? We also did host the soccer situation. And I saw us, by the way, with our famous 10 million in that. But that's a story for another day. You have a country like Malawi, whose own sense of income tends to be aid money, right? We need to be able to use, I believe, this particular issue of the trade plan that's coming to bear, to see it as a way to strengthen our infrastructure position. We can't look back, we've got to look forward. Many things have been done badly. Some actually by our international partners. I do see some, I heard and I want to confirm this, maybe Mr. Maimane knows this, that some countries who are French-speaking countries still pay a lot of homage to in cash. So even if you get $10, it still has to, you've got to have $7 go to the home country, where that was your colonizer. So what do you do with $30, with $3 that's left? Those things we don't talk about. We still have some remnants of things that must be done, that needs to be corrected. Because even if you're making the tax base, if you've got to pay France or Italy or whoever was the colonizer, it's difficult to be able to progress. And then you add in a little corruption in there, how's you doing? So, there's not enough to go around. I think for me, this particular trade agreement will be amazing if we use it to pull our funds together for our infrastructure. Because once we have our energy and our road infrastructure, we are able to free up a lot of the economy in all the countries. The thing that's interesting to me is if I go and get copper from Zambia to process here, I have to go through all these borders. Just the cost to bring the truck here, even if I'm just bringing concentrate, not even the hard material, to go from this border to this. There's a lot of friends along the way, who won't let me come through if I'm not a friendly person.
Yeah.
So how do we create that environment that makes everybody know that? We have SACU, for example. How do we create a SACU that if I'm coming through your country, I'll put in $10, we'll all share the $10. That $10 will help us to be able to build infrastructure, to have customs attraction, to create our own SARS where you're able to get maximum value from the tax base. That to me is, let's look forward, because looking back won't give us anything.
Sure.
Definitely.
And I think,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
There was also a question there in the front, very quickly, because I think we're also running late. I don't know if everybody's super excited about this discussion. I'll let it go. We will keep continuing, but maybe a quick question there before we answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Anna Bausenijk, and I'm a member of the State Parliament in Lower Saxony. And right now we are joining this discussion with a delegation from Germany, from the Young Union. And that is one point that you mentioned that is so important, that we do an active exchange. And I'm sure I can tell for everybody that, or for my delegation, that we do that right now, and it's great what we can take from this discussion and from our stay here and to bring it to Germany. One point that I wanted to ask is, you talked a lot about the own power of South Africa, and I think that is really important. And one thing is all this startup, and we discussed that in Germany as well. What we can do to have more startups, and a lot of companies in Germany do that by themselves, because it is hard to do that with politics sometimes, or it costs a lot of time when we don't have this time. And what are you doing here with your company, for example, you, to do more with startups in South Africa?
I think Savannah, or
So
maybe,
just a quick answer to that for me. You know, there's a thing that says how to make friends and influence people. There used to be a book. You influence and make friends by ensuring that the partnership from your business and our side of the world matches. You know, I think business matching is so critical. If I make this, who in Germany is also making this that I can work with, right? So that they can also be, you know, some knowledge transfer. And by the way, as Mr. Maimane is talking about it, sometimes we think that in this continent, we don't have the best makers of this. It is untrue. Sometimes we have the best. We just don't have the markets, we don't have the funding. Our banks are very difficult for a startup type situation. We just don't have the environment. You have to put up your home, as I did when I first began this some 20, 30 years ago, to be able to start the business. Because if you don't have the track record and the relationships and whatever, you're just on your own. And I think that's a global thing, but more so here. So the matching is important. But also organizations like yourselves, who are maybe not for profit or whatever, need to find a way to be able to almost be venture capitalists and angel investors. That's the right word. Angel investors. And choose an environment, manufacturing of X, because maybe you want X to be able to come into your country, and then you be able to support that. The biggest issue we have is operating capital. You know, I've heard of about 5 years ago, Mr. Maimane, I had people coming into my office in droves, and all of them were saying the government is killing our business. We come in, we offer them this, and they take 2 years to pay us. And if you don't give them something, they don't pay you. And yet government only takes the lowest bidder. So where do I get this money to give you? So 2 years, people are committing suicide. You guys don't even know this. Families are breaking. You guys don't even know this. And this is real, not someone who began today, the ones we hear about that the company opened today and it's now selling PPE. I'm talking about people who've been in business for over 10 years. They say, okay, the private sector will not give us business. Let's go to the public sector. They get there, they don't get paid. They close down. 100 people go out of jobs. And you do 100, before you wake up, it's 1 million, right? You've got to be able to work with us then as the government environment to help as policy people to work with our government, and also to work with us as the smaller businesses really need assistance. That's where we will grow the country. It will not be from the big guys. They are shrinking because they're bringing digitization, they're bringing in 4IR. So there's less and less people in these jobs. But in the job of making this, I can hire 100 people. And if they don't, and change the lives of 100 people.
Yeah.
But if people pay me in 60 days, if you come in as an angel investor to say, okay, they pay you 60 days before, after statement, I'll come in here, you can continue. Because what happens then? I come to a standstill. I can't make the bottles. So I can't buy the material to make the bottles now because you've not paid me. So even if you came with an order, it means nothing to me. The same thing in construction. If I'm going to construct something, I must come up with 10% of the value of the construction. Now, if I'm not paid by government and I cannot get my retention back, even if the project is finished, because they take about 20, the longest time to get the retention back, now I can't continue. The same thing in mining. There's so many areas where I've got to put money in before I can release something. So if I'm not paid on time, that means then what do you say? You can't trust these black businesses. They can't deliver. It's not true. It's not fair. Understand the entire story. So when we come in and request from you, as I speak to so many small businesses who could really change the trajectory of this country, is help us in the funding, help us in the markets. If you can help us in those two things, South Africa and the continent will fly. We are not lacking in entrepreneurs, in ideas, in capacity. So don't come with the idea that, oh, these poor people. We have businesses that have not even been thought of yet, but we need to be able to get the funding.
Yeah.
And so if that could be the place you could come in, you really could be a lifesaver and a game changer.
Yeah. Maybe, Christian, out of your experience?
Yeah, it's one of my passion topics, to be honest, entrepreneurs and startups in Africa. I'm cautious with the word startup because it's coming from the US and it means fast-growing tech companies, unicorns. No, Africa is the continent of entrepreneurs and problem solvers. And that's where now the linkage to the German comes. And I could talk about that for hours, but just it's a perfect fit. It's a really perfect fit. We in Germany, we built a so-called Mittelstand, small, medium-sized enterprises. We know how to do it. We know how to invest in the early stage, how product development works, how sales work. So that's a perfect synergy between African entrepreneurs, not startups, entrepreneurs, to bring them in. We lack of qualified workers. I mean, we have bottlenecks in digitalization. And some of the processes can be outsourced. They can happen here. We don't need to bring everything to the same location. But what we can and what we learned is the family businesses, the backbone of the German economy, our hidden champions. We can very synergetic work together with Africans to build that same economy. And that's the economy Africa needs. We don't need the big corporates listed on stock exchanges. No. We don't need them in Africa. There will be a few, of course, yeah, but that's not the backbone of the industry. So that's a very, very important thing. And on the flip side, what you said, the early stage investment, it's not hundreds of millions you need. And that's what maybe the German Mittelstand family businesses can do. They invest smaller amounts and try it out. It's also, again, investing into the relationship, finding out what entrepreneurs are on the continent. And these entrepreneurs, they have one advantage. They solve problems in Africa. And that gives the German access to the African market and vice versa, the Africans access to the German market. It's not that our machinery is best for Africa or that the way we dress is something the Africans like. So we need to also consider local content, and that's best with startups, entrepreneurs, and then again, coming together in a beneficial partnership.
I just wanted to if I can, answer part of the question that was asked about infrastructure build. Part of it is also not thinking about the infrastructure itself as the starting point, but think about their industry as the starting point. See, you can either look at development by saying, let's build roads. If we build it, industry will come. That's one way of going about it, and it's maybe applicable in other sectors. This is always the case. But if you think about development around a mine, let me just say that. That is saying we sink a mine here and force the government to build infrastructure there, right? And that is industry-led infrastructural development, which takes a different posture to whether, even if we think about rural development, etc. I can tell you, if you are an orange farmer in the Western Cape, you will soon demand for rail because you want to move those goods. Right. So I would urge, particularly for the purposes of business in this particular industry, let's think about critical sectors that we can identify that sink businesses and then force government to follow. Because I don't think government, one of the greatest failures of the democratic and even the recent era, if I'm willing to be fair, is that government has failed the basic job of planning.
Yeah.
The last set of rail infrastructure built, excluding the Gautrain as an example, was in 1979. Now, I was in Germany during what I will call the Lufthansa crisis, when I lost my bag in the European summer. Couldn't get anywhere. But you know what they were able to do? They were able to go, here's a €9 ticket. You can climb on all the trains all the time, go places. Now, that is important infrastructure. That was very helpful. But the truth is, for particularly our continent, we need to think about industries that we lead with and then force infrastructure to follow that. It's not going to be the case of saying, let's put a mid-rand station for Gautrain and hopefully industry will develop around it. Let me think about that. The other question about Lower Saxony. Now, I know it's got a partnership even with the Western Cape government in certain instances. I do think that in the opening of markets, I will say this up front, and if you are German, please take as much offense or as little as you like. But we have the best wine. I think, relatively speaking, we're better than yours. So how do we ensure that on key strategic sectors that we pick, we're able to identify markets that we can move those particular goods with far ease? I come back to my Lufthansa crisis by simply saying this. The major stimulus for micro enterprise in South Africa has to be led by how we respond to tourism as a fundamental function between the two countries. Because if you achieve what is now, it started 94, we only had 1 million tourists in the country, now we've got 13 million, I think that's insufficient. If we get it up to 20 million or so in proper partnerships between how much air travel happens between South Africa, Germany, etc. I pick one sector. I know there could be many others, but if I pick tourism, for example, it helps the stimulus of micro enterprise because for every tourist that lands here, at least the recent average was for every 13, we can create a job and industry. We can increase the number of Uber drivers. We can increase the number of bakeries. We can increase the number of Airbnbs. We can increase the number. So the ecosystem around micro enterprise that hire 3 or 4 people then becomes increased as a response to an stimulated demand around tourism as one sector. So I do think if you ask me about the partnership question, I think if we were just to target one sector around tourism, and then maybe we can move on to other sectors like business processing. Germany and South Africa share the same time zone invariably, right? That's now the same time in Germany.
With
now.
the time
Or 1 hour
change
difference,
now,
okay.
because we keep changing our
Okay.
times in winter and summer.
But the big advantage of that is that and I have to make this point as my closing remark. So
All right.
this is the point I want to make. Investment in this country happens to also be concentrated in certain sectors. I happen to think that the internet in Soweto can be as good and as fast as the internet in Sandton. So why not set up a business processing operation in Soweto rather than trying to go compete for space in Midrand? The reason for that is, A, it's cheaper for people to walk to work, but more seriously, it means that we can see the South African economy as it exists in its duality, rather than simply singularly saying the only place you can put up a call center is in Midrand or something. Because when we do that, to the stimulus of micro enterprise, you could truly perforate what we've inherited as spatial legacy, apartheid spatial legacy. You can perforate it by really setting up new industries. You know, my GPS doesn't, when I go to Soweto, say to me, you are entering a dangerous area. It assumes it's another suburb. So I would imagine the flow of capital, particularly from international markets, must be blind to our own historical issues and focus on saying, If there are citizens who are living in Soweto and we can give you the appropriate incentive to invest there, build infrastructure there, we'll give you the tax incentive so that ultimately when a German call center wants to call and say, look, I want to buy a cell phone, will help me fix this, that the call has been taken from Soweto or Tembisa would be irrelevant to them, but will be significantly important for our economy.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And I think what's important is where you come in that instance is you come in with that angel financing or that assistance financially, because it's a struggle to get our own banks to leapfrog into that, no matter what kind of amazing business. Because I'm going to have it in the township. They go, we've got a warehouse just here in Bryanston, it always invariably goes to that issue. So that's what folks like you can come in and do. I mean, one of the things we wanted to do was set up a woman to do a uniform after that uniform issue that you know about, set up a uniform thing. Why? There are women in Soweto, they're work to work and whatever, and the bank would not see it as something that they could do. We had the schools and everything. So we had to be able to bring in private funding to do it. And yet half the people who are at the school there and live in Soweto also go to school. So all the things make sense. But for some reason, there was just no uptake. So that's a very important area to be able to play in that funding area and allowing that particular growth to happen.
All right. I think I also have to make a cut here. Otherwise, I think we can discuss for the rest of the day. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on stage here. Thank you for the question. Thank you to the people online. And I welcome everybody here to continue the discussion. I think there will still be dessert outside and some drinks. Thank you also to our colleagues from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Christoph and his team who organized this event. So,
Dankeschön.
Dankeschön, and let's all visit Soweto at some point.
That's absolutely right. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.